Welcome to the RPGBOT.Podcast. I'm Randall James, and with me is Tyler Kamstra.
Hi, everybody. I'm no longer dying.
Yeah. Don't celebrate that.
You're right. That was bad form and bad etiquette. And, you know, when we're in certain situations, we need to remember our proper form, our proper etiquette, and our manners. Okay?
Yeah.
Certain social situations are awkward.
I mean, you've got a lot to learn about social interactions.
Yes, absolutely I do. I'm what you call an introvert and mildly autistic, so social situations are beyond me. But this episode's going to be very useful for me specifically.
That's why we have rules.
Yes.
Hoping you learn a lot. I was actually thinking he could be lying. Look at that face.
No, here, look, I'll even turn on my light so I don't look like a corpse. Boop.
Oh,
Look
no.
at me.
Yeah, you are feeling better. Okay.
Yeah, it's so
well-lit.
it's so weird seeing you guys during the day. Like the
I know.
excess light, it's disconcerting.
Honestly, like the back of my head is like a retroflector for the sun that's coming in. So I've got like this weird side halo thing going.
You're like a shiny cue ball. It's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I polish it.
So for people who aren't in the video chat, we are recording midday because as of when we record this, it's Super Bowl Sunday, and we would like to go watch the superb owl.
Does it go da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? Is that right? Is that how it goes?
I don't know anymore, man.
I think so.
That could be the
do they
Super
even
Bowl.
use
That could be the Lone Ranger.
I think it is. My dad, the reason I remember that is my dad would always do that. And the way that my mom would ruin it is she would add to it. So he would go, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and she goes, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Oh, that's cute.
And he's like, you just ruined it for me. Now I'm picturing all of them in little tutus pirouetting on the green. She's like, that was the point.
I got you good. I feel like we've learned a lot about social interactions the past 5 minutes. Tyler, do you want to teach us some more about it?
Let's do that.
Sure. Okay. So today we're going to talk about social skills in tabletop RPGs. And don't worry, I don't mean the kind that you as a person need to have. I mean the kind that your character has. I can't teach you the other ones. Sorry. But hey, I can tell you all about persuasion and intimidation and all the rest of those things. So we're going to look at those. And we're going to look across a few different systems. We're going to talk about things beyond just D&D and Pathfinder. We're going to look at social combat, quote unquote. It's going to be a whole thing. We're going to learn some things. It's going to be great. Should we go ahead and jump into 5e and just start from there?
I would love to do that.
Let's do that.
Normally, I like to throw us into the Wayback Machine, like right off the bat, so we can get like, where's the philosophical root of the modern RPG design, at least for D&D and stuff. The social skills for 5th edition are basically unchanged from 3rd edition. Like with some minor fiddly bits, very little has changed. But if you actually go and look in the Dungeon Master's Guide at the section on handling social situations, there's some stuff in here that I don't think I've ever seen anybody use ever. It's entirely possible people just don't know it exists. It's entirely possible that people have read it and been like, this is terrible and I won't commit it to memory. But there's some neat stuff in here. So let's take a look.
Most people thought this was awful, and I think it's great. Let's talk about it.
I didn't say it was great.
That's fair. Okay.
I said there's some things to learn.
Okay. Hard lessons.
A criticism I have heard of D&D for a very long time is that D&D's rules focus almost exclusively on combat. And the rules for social situations are basically non-existent. You have the descriptions of the various social skills, and really that's it. You're kind of just left to figure it out from there. And there's like 1 or 2 pages in the DMG on resolving interactions, which is the section title. It's Randall, I see you're flipping open the book. It's in the chapter Running the Game, if that helps you at all.
Resolving interactions under the larger heading Social Interaction.
Yeah. And about how much text is there, Randall?
Well, starting at social interactions, I am at, that's about 1.5 pages. That's solid.
Yeah.
If I include role-playing in my role-playing game, if I include role-playing, I get, that's a solid 2 pages.
And 350-page book.
Yeah, roundabout.
Yeah. D&D is rules light when it comes to social
situations.
I'm going to try those words again.
Social sticks.
Social sticks. Yeah. Maybe you could use a little bit of your own insight into social situations as well.
Apparently. Can it solve my tongue tie? I don't know. Don't actually have a tongue tie. That's a whole thing. Anyway, I'm just clumsy. All right. So
with never mind. Keep going.
I'm clumsy with my words. Like I talk like I write. You can hear the typos. Okay, so D&D is very rules light when it comes to social situations. There are 4 social skills. It's deception, intimidation, persuasion, and insight. Like that's really all of the buttons you have to push when you're in a social situation.
Sometimes performance.
Honestly, I forget performance exists. Yeah. I think you're right.
You can find some creative ways to bring in performance into social situations. Like, for instance, trying to blend into the crowd rather than like actively deceiving a person, like just acting like you're supposed to be there. That can be a performance check. So if you want to find more unique ways to bring in performance, that's one way you can do it.
Yeah. Another thing is making a distraction, but having it not look like a distraction. So folks figure out what you're trying to distract by. Like that's 100% performance. I feel like that's one of those situations where I'm going to look at my character sheet and be like, today I'd like that to be deception, but tomorrow's character.
Yeah. Performance doesn't always just have to be you on a stage performing.
And if anybody's had social interactions, especially awkward ones, like, it's not even your company Christmas party, it's your partner's company Christmas party that you're going to. And you think about, like, at the end of the day, what do you feel that you've done the most of? Intimidating? Possibly. Persuasion? Maybe. Performance? Absolutely.
Perform small talk.
Yeah. It's like, I need to be the person that I think I'm supposed to be in this scenario, because if I were me, I worry they would be unemployed tomorrow. But that's just me anyway.
Anyway. All right. Okay. So the D&D social situation rules for resolving social situations, resolving interactions, it ties weirdly into D&D's traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. So this is a mechanic that you've largely ignored. Like, you've taken that right column on your character sheet and been like, look at this weird void. And no matter how many times I look, there's never anything here.
There should be something here, but there's not.
There's 4 boxes. Do I just write STAB? Is that what that's for? I don't know.
Clearly.
That's good. You can also be BURN if you're a wizard.
There you go. Burn. Traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. Those tie into this system, especially for the NPCs, because working on the NPCs' traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws is intended to give you mechanical advantages. If you know those traits of the NPC you're talking to, the DM is supposed to let you leverage those to get advantage. So, like, if you know that the person you're talking to, their flaw is like they're just ludicrously vain. So if you lead every conversation with a ton of flattery, the DM is encouraged to give you advantage. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to look at like character sheets. You're not supposed to read the adventures. What you're intended to do to get the information about these characteristics is you're supposed to use insight, weirdly. Both of you have played a fair amount of 5e. Have either of you used insight on an NPC to learn about their personality?
Yes, I have. Not their traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. Never. But to get an idea of like their vibe or what they're about. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, it's never so structured, but it is that situation of like saying something and then determining like, did that offend them or not, or were they encouraged by my statement or not? Rolling and then hopefully getting an idea. The problem, and I don't mean to start throwing stones immediately, but if I'm the one rolling the insight check, unless I roll like something middling, either way, the player, Randall, know the answer. And this is where we'll talk about PF2 later. I love the idea of the secret rolls here, because honestly, tell me something. I don't know if I got it or not.
Let's see. I'm going to ask another question. Randall, you at least have run a lot of published adventures and stuff. Like, in the things that you have run for our group, how often are the NPCs listed with traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws?
Oh, that's honestly a great question. And I'm literally going to turn around in a second and grab a book. They may be, and I think I've mostly absorbed them. I promise you, I have not actually read them.
That feels right.
I'm going to be real transparent. Like I know, Darren Hightower, I know what he's about. I know what he wants. I know what he's aligned to, because he's fairly flat and one-dimensional. I didn't need to read traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws to get that down.
He's about Darren Hightower. He's about getting high in towers, right?
Correct, absolutely. Right, the gnome flinger, that's his mantra.
What a guy. Having read a few published adventures, the first instance I can think of in 5e where NPCs were explicitly given traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws was actually the D&D Essentials kit, which is 5-6 years into 5e's lifetime. That may not actually be the first instance, but the fact that that's the earliest one I can remember, and the DMG just expects you to have that, and they've set you up completely for failure in every published adventure before then, as far as I know. So yeah, this immediately is a very frustrating system. It's intended to be a DC 10 insight check. The DM gives you 1, so you can walk in, be like, what's this guy's deal? And the DM says, okay, this person, their bond is such and such. But if it's not written in a published adventure, then the DM has to make one up on the spot, and you're committing to something that might conflict with the story later on, which is going to cause you all kinds of problems. Like if you're playing homebrew, way less of a problem. Kind of sucks for publishing.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that Wizards of the Coast just is very inconsistent about who they apply the bonds and flaws thing to. Because like sometimes for important NPCs, they'll say how to roleplay, and then they'll give you a list of bonds and flaws, which I always ignore because come on, just tell me what their deal is. I don't need this list of arbitrary stuff that my players won't care about. If that's the system they're going to do, then they need to be consistent with it. Then they need to do it for most NPCs, and preferably for every monster block, there should be a default list of bonds, traits, and flaws, if that's the system that they want to encourage and use. But it's clear that they are wishy-washy on when it applies, and as a result, everybody ignores it. So if you want to play with the system, it needs to be baked into the system.
Yes. Now, I'm remembering that Volo's Guide to Monsters actually had tables of traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws for a bunch of different monsters in there. Mind flayers, giants,
it had ways
etc.
to generate them, but it didn't have like...
Like it had tables.
Yeah, it had tables. Everybody loves a good table. It didn't have like in the monster stat block, these are their suggested. You had to like go to the specific section on mind flayers, go through all of the different lore, and then find the table, which no one's going to do that. They're just going to go straight to the stat block.
Yeah, I want to highlight when you read the determining characteristics section of the DMG, it really feels like something we've talked about in other spaces, with like puzzles being a great example, where you almost want to provide access at multiple layers. For a table that does not want to do the social chat, that doesn't want to do the small talk, I'm not necessarily saying full murder hobo, but you know the type, you know what I'm getting at. It really feels like in determining characteristics, what they're giving you is a tool of, okay, look, here's the deal. Just, we're going to agree. You've talked to this character, this NPC, for enough time that I'm going to allow you to do an insight check. So if we're doing something like a party, if we have a limited amount of time, you're only going to get so many interactions in it. I'm going to make you talk for 10 to 15 minutes. It's a 2-hour party. You're going to get 8 of these tops. That's what I'm going to give you. You can roll that die, make the insight check, and it basically, here's what you learned from the conversation. Here's what you deduced as factually accurate. And it even gives you if you fail by more than 10, as the DM, I'm meant to lie to you. Now, I think the biggest weakness here is what I said a second ago. If I roll real bad, I know I rolled real bad. And so I'm going to hear what you say and be questioning. I would almost, as a DM, sometimes just tell you the truth anyway, just to like really mess with you. Most of the time, what I see DMs doing in 5e is not running this at the player level, but essentially pushing for it to happen at the character level, pushing the role play part of it, doing individual checks like deception, like insight, like persuasion to get them to talk, to get the details out, as opposed to the higher level, just, let's say some time passed, make me a roll, I'll tell you what you want to know.
I think the other problem with the system is that it asks players to make an insight check to get like your ideals, bonds, flaws, and stuff like that. You know, it's a great way to also do that. Just talking to the NPC. Like, you'll get a
character role play.
Yeah, you'll get a sense of what they're about by talking to them. And, the stuff that you would get from it is super not helpful. So does it really help to know that a person idealizes a particular hero of their faith and constantly refer to that person's deeds and example? Does that really help me at all? It's like, oh yeah, this champion guy would approve of what we're doing. It just really kind of pigeonholes you into like, okay, what's the switch I need to push to get the best answer? And that it makes roleplay more limiting.
I think I'm going to push back, or maybe I misunderstand you. I feel like the idea of like learning that they're big on protecting the youth because maybe they grew up in an orphanage, knowing that, and that if we have somebody in the party who has a similar background, getting that honest, like, I really feel you. And I feel like my ambition or my goal, the party's goals, align really well with that. So I'm going to say something that's like, yeah, we want to stop this invasion. We can't help but think what's going to happen to the children of this village if the invasion goes forward. That is, in a real sense, you've leveraged the character roleplay. You've learned something about them. You're now presenting that to help you make your argument for whatever you really want to persuade to come out of this conversation.
Okay, I can kind of see what you're getting at there. I think then maybe this system is useful for when your players are stumped as to how to approach an NPC, like they've tried different avenues and nothing's working. And you're still kind of figuring out the character yourself. And this is a good way to just sort of be like, well, they like kids, so maybe try the kid approach. I would say this is something that new DMs and players start out with using because it's a good safety net to sort of help new DMs figure stuff out and for players to just get the information they need. But as you progress, you use these systems less and less because once you're able to fully inhabit characters, the fact that they like children and orphans will come up organically and naturally through the course of a conversation with an NPC.
Unless it's a hag, in which case the fact that they like orphans is a very different thing.
Probably a bad thing, yeah.
I want to bring this back. There's another aspect of like the social interaction that we should talk about, which is the starting attitude. And so like I'm giving this example of I could use something to either change your attitude about me as a person, the entire party, or at least my ask. And there is, again, it's a pretty light mechanic set, but there's a little bit of mechanics here that are going to help us have that conversation, drive it forward, maybe make our checks a bit easier.
5e has 3 tiers of starting attitude, or, well, just attitude, NPC attitude towards the party. It's friendly, indifferent, hostile. Very easy to remember, positive, neutral, negative. Positive, they are likely to help you as long as it doesn't inconvenience or endanger them or cost them something. Indifferent, they're unlikely to help you, but they're probably not going to cause you problems. And if you ask them to do anything that endangers them, they just won't. Hostile creatures are likely to cause you trouble, to inhibit you in some way. They may not want to endanger themselves or put themselves at any sort of cost to do that unless they really dislike you. But also, they're generally not going to do anything helpful for you by choice. The way that it's intended to work, according to the Dungeon Master's Guide, is you start every social situation by figuring out, like, okay, the NPCs, what is their starting attitude towards the players? Positive, neutral, negative. And the players can only shift that one step up or down within the space of that social interaction. So no matter like how long they're talking, until the two sides like separate, reform opinions, and then come back together again, you're not going to move more than one step. If you go and meet up with your best friend, you're not going to walk out mortal enemies unless something really crazy happens.
Broken verisimilitude right there.
Yeah. At the same time, if you go and find the big bad evil person and have a nice conversation with them, you're probably not going to walk out high-fiving and having a party.
It helps to remember sometimes when we're dealing with diplomacy checks that diplomacy isn't magic, or I'm saying diplomacy. I've been running Pathfinder. Persuasion.
Yeah.
Persuasion checks are not magic. And
they're not mind control.
And they're not mind control. Even a crit is not a mind control thing. And so it helps to know. And sometimes I forget this, and I think that the attitudes can be helpful because it tells you what happens like on a crit and stuff like that. It's just helpful to know, like, okay, you'll move the needle in a certain direction, but you're not going to get everything you want based on what their attitude is. Like usually a crit will maybe move, depending on the situation, will move your attitude level up one step. But that's about as much as it'll do. It'll turn a hostile enemy into indifferent. So they're still not going to be like, we're best friends now, and I will do everything you want me to. You want me to give up my plan? Cool. I'm no longer the villain anymore.
The kingdom is yours.
Here's my phylactery. You can destroy it. I don't want to live anymore. That's great.
Although, honestly, you can imagine some liches who have met a character that made them feel that way.
Although I have said, I will say, I say that I have one player who has, well, actually one character. Whenever they play this character, they're very good at redeeming multiple villains that I put in front of them. But that's because that person was open to change and the player made a sound argument and the roles were in their favor. So when all of those things align, then it works out, rather than just like a 180 switch just because you rolled a natural 20 on an in persuasion check. That's not how it works.
So we've talked about the idea of the NPC's attitude towards us. We've talked about how we can learn about some things that make that NPC tick. Ultimately, the reason we build a favor with NPCs is because we want to ask for a favor.
Frequently.
Yeah, maybe it's something we're going to cache, we're going to put in our pocket, and we'll come deal with it later. But a lot of times, unless the goal is strictly the information that we're gaining from the conversation, even in that case, it may be, I want you to tell me this secret, or I want you to tell me this story, which maybe isn't a secret, but I need you to tell it to me because I need to hear what happened in the scenario. Even that might be a persuasion check. The way that we've described it, if they're friendly towards me, or at least if they started indifferently and they became friendly, and all I'm asking for you to do is tell me a story, pretty easy DC check. But all of this leads to, and again, the 400 of these words or so are about, and a table, we got a cool table, folks, are about how do I set up that check once we've established what the attitude is, and once we've had a conversation to understand how this NPC feels.
The way that the checks are intended to work according to the DMG are a little odd. I'm going to read the text verbatim. When the adventurers get to the point of their request, demand, or suggestion, or if you decide the conversation has run its course, call for a charisma check. So the intent is you don't make any checks until the end of the conversation and then determine the result. And then the text on who rolls is any character who has actively participated in the conversation can make the check. So like if you've got your whole party talking, you don't need to be like, okay, Barbarian, you and your 8 charisma, go sit down. As long as the face character participates in the conversation, they can still roll the skill check and the entire party can talk. Way better table interaction than having one person do all the talking, in my opinion.
And so if you're doing it at the player level and you're not going down and actually having them role play it, you can simply establish like who's going to be participating in this conversation, what is everybody else doing, and then you'll hold them to that unless part of the way through what you're describing, they're like, actually, I do hop in because I hear that word and I get in there. Now you know who's eligible to make the check. One thing you said, Tyler, I want to ask you about. So you said that I'm not going to make any checks getting into it. I think the way that it's written in the DMG, I'm likely to be making an insight check in order to learn something about the NPC.
Yeah.
To structure. Sorry, you mean once the charisma check starts?
Yeah.
I got you.
So essentially the loop is starting attitude, role playing, charisma check, and then if the players want to continue the conversation, basically start the loop again. So like you might start a social interaction by like the players try to improve the NPC's attitude so they're in a better situation to make a request. And honestly, aside from the chance of failure, there's very little reason for the players to not do that. Okay, so you get to the end of the social situation. You make the charisma check. Anybody can roll. There's a specific thing on aiding. Anyone who said something useful, like that contributed to the conversation, can provide advantage. So like the entire party is talking. One person rolls the charisma check. If somebody else in the party did something useful, they get advantage. If somebody else in the party did something harmful, they get disadvantage. And I imagine those can negate each other. So like, you as the DM keep track, like, oh, did they accidentally insult the person they're talking to? Like, did they offer this person a gift or give them some useful information or something like that? And you can use advantage and disadvantage to reflect those. And it does give some benefit to other people actively engaging in the conversation beyond just whoever's playing the face character.
Here's what I'll say about this system that we've been talking through. My wife is a realtor. I occasionally hear her very nicely say that a house has good bones. I think the flow of this, what we've described, makes perfect sense. I think folks tend to go to, instead of player get in there, spend some time talking, maybe we'll just go back and forth and then we'll go to that insight check. I think all of us immediately go to, okay, I feel like what you said was a little bit deceptive. We're going to get a deception check and we're going to ride that for the next couple lies you tell. You're attempting to persuade. Okay, now we're to the crux of it. That's our charisma check because you're trying to persuade them or you're trying to intimidate them into something. So we're going to make that check. And then ideally, we're kind of holding the line. I think when we go through that flow, what we miss is the kind of opportunity that you were just describing, Tyler. Imagine just tracking the checks we're making through the conversation, whether it's the deception check, whether it's the intimidation checks along the way, whatever it may be, tracking the successes and failures. And then when we get to the point of actually the crux of the matter, the thing that we're trying to make happen, whether it's give me information, whether it's do me a favor in the future, at that point, we could leverage the previous checks to both we're going to set the DC based on how this person feels about me and what we're asking of them. But we're also going to make a decision about advantage or disadvantage based on how the characters handled themselves in the conversation and the checks they made.
Exactly. Let's talk about the DCs real quick. So the Dungeon Master's Guide doesn't give any guidance on improvising a DC here. The listed method for handling it is, depending on the NPC's attitude toward the party, there is a table of DCs. It's 0, 10, 20, and depending on how the party does on the charisma check, you get a different result. Like most skill checks in D&D, there's one DC, pass or fail. In this one, it's more like degrees of success, kind of like Pathfinder. So it's like you can get the worst result, the good result, or the great result. If they're friendly, the results are something like on a 20, they'll just do whatever you ask of them, no questions asked. On a 10, they'll do something, but they might need something in return. I can't remember the result for 0 off the top of my head. Randall, I think you have it in front of you, don't you?
For a friendly, the creature does as asked without taking risks or major sacrifices. Making sacrifices.
So as long as it's not a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Versus if we go to hostile, a 0 is the creature opposes the adventurer's actions and might take risks to do so.
Yeah, and then there's the elephant in the room, which is that the level 5 eloquence bard can't fail these checks ever.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
Yeah, with the...
And the reason for that is like everything added up together, like they're not going to roll less than a 20.
Exactly. Like they have a feature that lets them roll at a minimum of 10 on charisma checks, and then 18 charisma and expertise at that level, your minimum roll is 21.
Yeah.
Which means you literally can't fail in a social situation.
I hate that. I think that's silly. I think we should,
I
depending
don't like
on
it
the
either.
degree of what we're asking. And honestly, nobody's doing that. Let's be very realistic.
Yeah.
So great bones. We're going to put some new paint.
You don't have players who try to do this crap to you? Because I do, and it drives me crazy.
No, I do not.
As soon as one of my players got to level 5 as an eloquence bard, they're like, "Hey, my minimum roll is a 21 on charisma checks. Have fun with that." I'm like, I hate you. You're the worst.
I invented a new thing called secret double hostile. Take that.
Yeah. All your DCs are now 25. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's fine. One more thing I want to highlight here. We talked about one person is going to make the check. And so that's where, as a party, it's important to have the face participating in the conversation. So at the last minute, they can come in and close. You know, they're going to do the Alec Baldwin speech from
that one.
Glenn Ross.
Exactly. Thank you. I panicked for a second. We'll have a link in the show notes. If you haven't seen it, it's great. So they're going to make the one check. Depending on what you're doing, and often, let's say you have multiple goals, you know, I want you to, king, I want you to close the gates, and I want you to raise an army, and I want you to open the inn. Those are 3 different asks that I'm pushing for. And so I might have multiple checks for each one of them. If what you're doing is like large, complex, and it's kind of critical for what the party is trying to accomplish, you might turn this into something that looks a lot like a skill challenge where you're actually going to roll people through it. On the flip side, if it's more of a simple challenge, like I started this conversation indifferent, I have driven you to hostile, I have asked you a failure and I've failed. If that is the result you get, no more redos. And any further attempts might make that person hate you more. And as a DM, you have to figure out how you're going to handle that. Either you're going to invent double secret hatred, or maybe there's a cooling period, a timeout period where this person won't even engage with you for a period of time until they've let a couple things settle. But be willing to kind of stand by it and say, no, we're not moving this forward. What that also means is especially if it was information you were trying to get or a favor, you have to have another mechanism for the party to achieve, because failing a roll doesn't mean the end of the story or the end of the campaign.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. There are ideas here. Some of them are even good. But Randall, I think you're absolutely right. It needs to go to paint. You can't gate information behind a single skill check. You can't gate progress behind a single skill check. There's a lot of adjustment that needs to be done to these rules, in my opinion, to really make this actually work. And it seems like the community has pretty resoundingly just ignored the text here, which, yeah, can't blame them. Personally, I really do like using insight and the traits, ideals, bonds, flaws. That's a good option, especially for parties that aren't great at the social role-playing stuff. It does reduce a lot of social interactions to kind of a crude mechanical thing. But it also means, like, as you get to know NPCs more, you can build out their traits, ideals, bonds, flaws, like write those down, be like, okay, I actually know this person now. Like, I know their whole deal.
Yeah, I think the system is serviceable. It does what it wants to. Does it improve social situation encounters? Does it make them easier? Does it make them more enjoyable? I don't think so. I think that it's a good safety net or a good place to start when you don't know how to roleplay or you don't know what to do. But past that, this doesn't really add much to the social system.
I'm going to shock you a little bit. I like this. The reason I like this is I think that there are some tables where, honestly, this isn't the part of the game that they're here for, but it is fun and interesting to bring it in a little bit. So kind of giving that out of, I'm not going to force you to awkwardly do roleplay, even though I as a DM love it. I'm willing to give you the out of like, hey, do you guys want to do the roleplay today? Or do you want to commit to a bit of time talking to them and then we're going to do some rolls and resolve this? I think a lot of tables, we're going to move past this. We're going to get to the point where I start stabbing people a lot faster, but we're still going to have some character development. And that might be fine. That might be exactly what they're there for.
So yeah, then clarification. This is good for some tables. The reason why I don't like it is because I have never played with those tables. Pretty much every table that I've played with is there for role play. That's why we're playing the game. Combat is fun, but they're there for role play and character development. So that's why I pretty much completely ignore this system. But if your players are just there for combat, then yeah, the system works. Although I would just at that point suggest, why don't you just play 3.5 or 2E, because it has a better in-depth combat system that's more focused and geared towards that. But that's just me.
Okay. Well, I guess speaking of PF2.
Yeah, okay, so let's look at PF2 for comparison. This actually might surprise folks. The social interaction rules in PF2 are really similar to those in 5e.
Yeah, not much changes.
They're much more specific. Yeah, they are much more specific because it's Pathfinder, but other than that, they really work the same way. Instead of the 3-step attitude scale, it's a 5-step attitude scale. So it goes helpful, friendly, indifferent, unfriendly, hostile. And you can temporarily shift attitudes up or down by taking the make an impression action, which critical success up by 2, success up by 1, failure, nothing happens, critical failure down by 1. So there is a possibility that you can try and make an impression, do a bad job, make things worse. And then the deception lets you lie, diplomacy lets you make an impression or make a request, and intimidation lets you coerce. And those are the 3 buttons you press to interact with other creatures. Generally, the DC is going to be the creature's perception DC, which is basically passive insight and passive perception if you're coming from 5e. Other than that, it's kind of the same. There's no traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, but it's all the same buttons to push to get essentially the same results.
Yeah.
There's a few things that I want to highlight here. So the Game Master's Guide has an influence system. And so that can drive a little bit more complexity. Maybe a great example, because it's a campaign that I have started running, published campaign. Kingmaker leverages pretty heavy early on. You go to a dinner party, spoilers, but come with me. It's only a 15-year-old PF1 game now, PF2.
Yeah.
And 5e. You can play Kingmaker everywhere you want, as long as the answer is PF1, PF2, or 5e. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So the influence system allows you to build influence through positive interactions, making the checks that you were just describing, Tyler, where as a published module, they give great examples of here's exactly what you're going to get. And it is different for every single character. So it's less about, like you said, the traits, bonds, flaws, and ideals. It is more about, if I invest in this relationship, if I invest in this friendship, there is a quoted thing for the GM to determine what the party is going to get out of it now and later. And I think that structure is pretty robust. It's useful. I feel like the biggest improvement that I see here over what we just reviewed on 5e is that there's enough nuance, 5 steps instead of 3 steps as far as what our relationship with them is. 0 to 10 on an influence scale is going to allow the GM to structure a bit more and make it interesting and worth the investment in growing a relationship with these NPCs.
I'm struggling to remember if the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide has anything of the sort. But yeah, using the influence system to track long-term relationships, definitely a great addition.
Yeah. I think especially this is good for, like, say you've captured enemy like servant and you're trying to like redeem them or just show the error of their ways. And you as a DM are like, how do I do this in a way that doesn't feel like they're just turning on a dime? You could use track influence points in the influence system to help see what sort of level of sway your party builds over time with an NPC. Just off the top of my head, that's an example where this could definitely be very helpful.
A few other things that you can get with NPC characters: resistances, things that they hate. And so now even qualitatively, the way that you interact, the way that you do role play might lead to the NPC thinking less of you or making your skill checks more difficult. A interaction weakness, in other words, things that they like or things that you would do that would show them off. So if somebody like really values strength and before you went to talk to them, like you did a handstand push-up a couple times and then you were like, hey, how's it going? How's the smoked salmon today? Maybe it turns out later you find out they just love smoked salmon, but either way, you're going to get an advantage as you go to do roles in the future. And then finally, defining a penalty, which is if you cross this line, and a lot of times it tickles towards something that is obvious about the character. If you cross that line, no influence for you today, or at least you're going to take some penalty in future checks.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it actually it brings some of the character's personality into it beyond just checks and DCs, which is nice.
Yeah. Now, what I will say for this is if you're a homebrewer, if you're a person developing your own games, or you're running a module where you don't have this, that is a lot of work to put together thoughtfully to not only define the character, but define the appropriate benefits and penalties that will essentially allow the party to navigate this and have meaningful outcomes. I think using examples from published modules and like spending a lot of time getting comfortable with that is probably a good way to get there. But I do worry a little bit that you might have a hard time sitting down and getting it right from scratch. But Game Master's Guide can help you. So
I want to look at kind of an unusual choice here. So I want to look at the Lord of the Rings role-playing 5e rules. So this is Free League's adaptation of One Ring second edition to the 5e rule set. We have a review up on the website. I read it in depth and reviewed it, and I actually really like it. It's a great system, I think. So One Ring has rules for councils, which are essentially complicated social interactions. So this is like you go and you talk to Elrond, and like you need help, and you need to form a fellowship to take the ring to Mordor and destroy it.
As an example.
As an example. Yes.
Yeah, perfectly fine.
Anytime you're going to have like a detailed, interesting social interaction, you're going to use the council rules. They have prescribed steps that set the stage, get you ready to role play, and then have you make some checks and then determine the outcomes. This is a great way to add some structure to a social situation in D&D, in Pathfinder, potentially in other RPGs, so that you're not defaulting to like, we spend an hour asking for a thing and then it's one charisma check and then pass fail. This gives more room to make checks as you play, more room to fail those checks and still potentially succeed at the overall interaction, some back and forth. I didn't want to have to adapt this system to 5e. It looks really cool. I didn't want to have to do that work. And then One Ring published Lord of the Rings role-playing 5e, and there it is, all done for me, so I'm just going to steal it. Okay, so how this works. Let's say a caveat before we go into the rules. So the DCs for everything are fixed and really, really low by 5e standards because Lord of the Rings doesn't have like accessible magic, really. You can't cast spells. You can't throw guidance on every single charisma check, unfortunately. So the DCs are pretty low by 5e standards. And also the level cap is only 10. So your proficiency bonus never gets better than +4. Max level character probably going to have like a +8 at most on their checks. DCs are fairly fixed. Council. So step 1 is the introduction. So you start with a charisma check. Like very first thing, you enter the situation, you make a charisma check. Now you get to choose what kind of charisma check to make here. You can use persuasion to like ingratiate yourself. You could use intimidation to like look big and tough and scary. The One Ring rules, the intimidation skill is called awe, AWE, like it essentially look impressive. Depending on what your party is good at or what the situation calls for, you can make different kinds of charisma checks and set yourself up for success. So the DC for this initial check is always 15. Like I said, the DCs are fairly low and fixed. And even though there aren't really degrees of success in like your 5e rule set, they essentially give you degrees of success in this. So if you pass, you get 1 free reroll for a charisma check during the entire council. If you pass by 5 or more, you get 2. If you fail by 5 or more, all of your charisma checks in the entire council are made with disadvantage. So you can set yourself up for failure right off the bat on that initial charisma check.
Which, honestly, that's true to real life. Like, you go in to open a conversation and you go for it and you get the wrong zinger out there and it's like, I'm dead to you. I'm just going to move on now. I do think, well, let me ask you, Tyler, because, you're running this. Do you want to go through all of this and we'll pick our heads up and talk about it? Or do you want to maybe talk about it at every step?
Let's run through it real fast and then we'll go back and revisit. So step 1 is the introduction. You make that initial charisma check. Step 2, the DM will set the required number of successes for what the players want out of this interaction. So it's based on what you're trying to get out of things. So if you're asking for something reasonable, you need 1 success. If you're asking for something bold is the word they use. So it's like, okay, that's a lot for you to ask. Then it's going to be 2 successes. If it's outrageous, it's going to be 3 successes. So if you're used to skill challenges from 4th edition, this is going to feel pretty similar. The number of successes is actually fairly low, all things considered. Considering the setup process for this, like having 1 success required feels a little silly. Honestly, I would probably bump those numbers up or even just double them outright. So reasonable, bold, outrageous. Step 3, DM sets attitude. So this is the same as 5e and Pathfinder. Like, you have that initial attitude, and the words they use are reluctant, open, and friendly. So that, again, it's positive, neutral, negative. And depending on their attitude, that sets the DCs for all of your charisma checks. So the hardest is 20, the easiest is 10. Going into people that don't like you really need to make a good first impression, because if you're rolling with disadvantage on all your checks, you're not going to hit that 20 consistently. Step 4 is the actual role-playing part where you have the conversation. And then finally, step 5 is you determine the outcome, you roll checks. Now, it doesn't specify who exactly makes the charisma check, so I imagine it's just up to the party, like who wants to contribute a charisma check to this. If you get the number of successes you need, you succeed. If you don't, you fail, but it gives you the option of a fail forward mechanic with the DM's permission, so you can succeed at a steep price. And if you fail the check by 10 or more, or 5 or more if the request is outrageous, the NPCs are now hostile and they may actively just attack you outright. So, don't fail.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. So introduction, determine the number of successes, set attitude, role play, and then roll dice at the end, basically.
It's not bad.
Do you remember earlier when I was like 5e, like this could wind up feeling a lot like a skill challenge?
Yeah.
I'm getting them vibes.
It's a skill challenge.
Yeah.
But the thing is that skill challenges are popular for a reason. They're skill challenges. Yeah, they're one of the few good things that 4th edition contributed and that 5e just swiftly abandoned. I think skill challenges are great, and people should use them more. They're fun, and they add a lot.
I use them. I like them.
Yeah.
Okay, the observation I had from the get-go, step 1, we're going to roll a DC 15 check. It makes perfect sense to me, and that part's fine. The fixed DC, also fine. The idea that I can use any charisma skill that I want in order to set this up is a little bit wonky. Like, I can't imagine walking in front of the king and intimidating them. I can't imagine going in front of a clown and putting on a performance. Like, there's certain things you don't do. And so the fact that it honestly doesn't matter, like across the party, who has the best roll and not the worst dice themselves, make me a roll and let's get into this.
Yeah, that's a way that it can happen. But if I disagree a little bit. I think the way that I'm interpreting it is that this first check is not you saying something in a certain tone, but it's how you present yourself and what immediately radiates off you as you present yourself. So if you're going with like a persuasion check, maybe you're coming across as a very reasonable person, diplomatic, professional, that kind of stuff. If you're doing an intimidation check, maybe it's like, oh, this is a capable, strong warrior who is deserving of my respect because he has a proud demeanor. Or a deception check is like, this guy's smooth, He puts himself together really well, or maybe it's a person who knows they're not supposed to be in that situation, but acts like they are supposed to be in that situation. So I disagree. I think I don't mind being able to choose a check that I think fits the situation, and it allows players like who are maybe better at intimidation but never really get that like opportunity to use it, because intimidation is kind of the risky charisma check, to get to use that some. And yeah, I could see that being interesting.
I follow what you say, and I think everything you makes good sense. Like, I'm not going to argue against it. I think this is going to be fine. I think folks will enjoy it. I will say the way that you described that, I imagined, like, I went immediately to body language, where like somebody using intimidation, like before they walked in, they were like doing push-ups to get a pump. So when they go in there, they can like subtly flex a little bit. And I'm like, what does that look like for persuasion? How do I manifest persuasion without speaking? And all I went to is like somebody just like making eyes, like the, yeah.
Well, the way you do that with persuasion is pretty simple. Let's say you go into a job interview, you dress professionally, you look like you're supposed to, not like you're the man for the job, even before any words come out of your mouth. So the way I would describe persuasion as a demeanor is just professionalism.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So the assassin just goes in like wearing a shroud of knives, and the king's like, this one, this is
I feel like that's more of intimidation, but yeah, fair enough.
It's fair. Yeah, it's like you don't go for subtlety. Like, I hear assassins like that. You have, I like the cut of your jib.
I agree on all of those points. I think I would.
Did you just? I'm with you, fellas. Us.
I'm with you, fellas.
Kind of, but also I would use advantage and disadvantage to reward or dissuade the response. Like, if the situation calls for tact, professionalism, politeness, decorum, those kind of things, and the party wants to go in with intimidation, I'm going to give them disadvantage. Like, you don't kick in the door to a dinner party.
I agree.
I'm happy.
Well, yeah,
I think it depends. Yeah, it depends on the situation. I agree. If you're talking to a bunch of orcs, maybe intimidation is going to get you further than trying to look professional. So yeah.
Yeah, and that makes all of the social skills equally valuable. And well, I can't say equally, but it makes them more valuable beyond just persuasion, because if you're going into a situation where like you need to look tough, you need to use intimidation, you're going to that like orc war council or something, you need to look big and strong. If you look around the party and everyone is like mild-mannered, soft-spoken, polite people, it's like, okay, we're kind of in over our heads here. We might need help.
What anime is this?
So let's look a little further afield.
Before we move on, I just want to say I do like the system. I think that it adds a little bit more to the social encounter and allows a flow to the conversation to meet like certain like benchmarks. And they already have this for 5th edition, but you could also easily adapt this to Pathfinder 2 if you wanted to. Just make the first check a standard check for the player's level, and then you can adjust the DCs for reluctant, open, and friendly to be hard, standard, and easy based on how you want to do it. But yeah, I think this is definitely an improvement on the previous 2 systems.
I want to briefly go in the teeny tiny Wayback Machine. I meant to say this during the PF2 conversation. In 5e, I called it, look, PF2 has secret rules in the grade, and we'll talk about them later, and then we never said anything. The idea being, it makes sense in social interactions. The DM gets the modifier, GM gets the modifier, rolls it behind the screen so nobody sees the result, and just gives feedback. Adds a lot more uncertainty. Yeah, it kind of creates that questionable, like, it can be really fun to find out later you really misread the room and you stuck your foot in your mouth. And sometimes that feedback's going to come immediately because of the way the role play is going to roll out. And sometimes you're going to find out much, much later. It's like, no, they hate chocolate. They weren't kidding.
Yeah. That is definitely a good way to play it. Having uncertainty in social situations adds that verisimilitude to it. So
didn't want to go on without hitting it.
No, you're good.
I'm with you, fellas.
Beautiful.
No, but I agree that does add a lot of fun and suspense. So I agree that would add.
Just be careful with which groups you do that with, because some groups really don't like the secret checks. Like a lot of players like to roll, and they don't like knowing the results of their roll.
Yeah, I hear that. It's in the rules for PF2 though. I can't.
Yeah, I understand.
What if they roll, but they throw it at you? They kind of like, just toss it in this cup. I'll read it.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying you're going to get pushback on that from players. Speaking as someone
different things are good for different parties.
Yep, exactly.
I want to look beyond where we normally look. And Ash, I'm going to call on your expertise here to talk about a couple of other games outside of our usual purview.
Sure thing.
What can you tell me about Powered by the Apocalypse games and how social skills work?
So Powered by the Apocalypse, it works pretty similar to how it works with anything in Powered by the Apocalypse, but it really kind of depends on which Powered by the Apocalypse game you're talking about, because different games will have different focuses. So like a Monster of the Week game, you're probably not going to be doing much social interaction. Most of that is investigation and combat. And social interaction can sometimes come in without, like when you're questioning a witness and stuff like that. But like anything else in Powered by the Apocalypse, when you're dealing with a social encounter, there's no like attitudes or anything like that you have to track. Powered by the Apocalypse is a very system mechanics light system. So basically you have different moves that you can do, which are like actions, like form a plan or execute an idea, stuff like that. So you pick a move, you roll 2d6, and then you have varying levels of success based on what you rolled. The DM doesn't necessarily have a stat block for like a commoner NPC you're just talking to. If you roll a 10 or a 7 to 10, that's considered a success without consequence. I think it's a 7 to 10. It's one of those, but like there's a ratio, just success without consequence, and there's a partial success, which is like a success. It can be also interpreted as success with a consequence, and then there's a miss or a failure, which doesn't necessarily mean that something bad happens, just means you don't succeed at whatever you were trying to do. So that's essentially how it works. Certain games like Monster Hearts really emphasizes the social stuff, where you're a monster in a high school and you're basically trying to get laid. So social interactions is going to have a lot more of importance. There's like, failing some roles can make you make your monster tendency come out, or something like getting embarrassed and stuff like that. City of Mist and the new one that they're coming out with, Legend in the Mists, has an interesting system where your roles are modified by tags and like descriptive tags. Maybe you're strong-armed, or you have a bushel of apples, and that that modifies the role in some shape or form. Powered by the Apocalypse, really mechanics light, simple system. That's why there's so many hacks for it, because it's really easy to teach a player how to play the game with very little time.
Ash, I was following that. That all made a lot of sense. There was a transition there so I have a bushel of apples, and what?
So that wasn't related to a social situation, but like,
okay,
yeah, no, just generally, because I was giving an example that I saw on Legend of Mist, which is there's this apple picker, and they are trying to fight this revenant. They have the bushel of apples trait, which adds a bonus to whatever they're to throwing an apple at someone. So yeah, okay. There are different traits. Yeah, there are different traits that are useful in different situations, different tags, that kind of stuff.
Actually, I feel like chucking apples people is a social skill, but carry it.
Yeah, that's probably not going to get you much in a social situation, though. But yeah, that's Powered by the Apocalypse. It really depends on what system, which game you're talking about, because while they all use basically the same kind of system, how they approach that system and what they're focused on can vary wildly. And we could be here all night talking about the intricacies and differences of the different hacks for Powered by the Apocalypse. But in a nutshell, that's essentially how it works.
Now, we've played a bit of this one on the How to Play series, but can we talk about Vampire the Masquerade? Because I feel like there was a deeper social system there that we didn't really get to dig into in 2 hours of play.
Yeah. So the Vampire is very much a social game, probably more so than it is a combat simulator. Very political, heavy game. You have 3 different types of charisma attributes. It's not just, they're called your social attributes. So it's not just one catch-all. Charisma is the skill you use, or the attribute you use. And then you have obviously skills within that you can use. So the 3 ones under the social attributes are charisma, manipulation, and appearance. Charisma is just like your raw magnetism, like how we talked before, like making a good impression in the Lord of the Rings thing. That's just like what radiates off you as you enter a room. Appearance can affect a person's attitude towards you. Like if you're ugly, a person's probably not going to want to talk to you as much or maybe help you as much. If you're really hot and attractive, people will probably do anything to help you. So appearance can factor in, especially when you're trying to like seduce someone, because this is vampire. You're probably going to be doing that quite a bit, especially if you're like a person who wants to not draw attention to themselves when they're feeding, and that requires someone to try to, you know, entice someone to come out with you to the alley for a kiss. It's just not the kiss they were expecting. Manipulation is kind of like a catch-all term for intimidation, deception, and persuasion. Like it's just how you are able to manipulate people into doing what you think. And the way it works in any social situation is the storyteller will ask you to combine an attribute with a skill or two attributes together, and you roll that. It's always a contested check, especially if you're trying to convince someone, especially you're trying to convince a vampire. They usually roll resolve or perception or wits or stuff like that.
For manipulation, I love the descriptors they give for this. So starting with kind of the middling skill, you never have to pay full price for anything, to you could be a cult leader or a politician.
Yeah.
God.
No, that's what's great about vampire is they tell you at various points like what your certain level of skill means. Like with strength, it's like, the worst is you have trouble lifting just like a can off the counter. Or if you're maxed out strength, it's like, oh yeah, you can lift a car over your head and twirl it around. So yeah, those are good for a laugh. But yeah, basically you're trying to get certain amount of successes. The DM will put an amount of successes in their head as to how difficult they think the request is. So like something that's pretty reasonable to ask of someone might only require one success. Something that's a little bit more demanding might be 2 to 3. Something that's like a really big ask is going to be like 4 to maybe even 6 successes. And since it's usually a contested check, that means that you're not only trying to roll the successes on your die, you're trying to beat whatever successes your opponent beats. That's just a basic simple system, but Vampire does have a very cool system for more in-depth social encounters called social combat, which is very fun. It's usually comes into play with like those tense negotiation situations. Like maybe you were ambushed by a rival coterie and you're trying to say, hey, let's work this out. We don't have to fight. Let's talk this through, that sort of stuff. Or maybe you're trying to convince the prince or a primogen of a city that this one guy who is really popular is actually trying to overthrow them or work against them in some way. In that case, where the stakes are pretty high and the consequences for failure can be kind of dire, the storyteller might call for a social combat encounter. And what that is it's basically works exactly like regular combat, where you're rolling contested checks based on what you say, what you're trying to communicate. So like, you know, throwing stuff to emphasize your point, or like pounding your fists on the table might be, you know, manipulation plus intimidate or something like that, or charisma plus intimidate, whatever the storyteller feels the check calls for. And your opponent then counters that with their own check. And you know, if it's a tie, nobody really gets hurt. But if one of you succeeds, then it's kind of like with damage from a health pool. You take a number of willpower damage equal to the difference between you and your opponent. If, like, say, your opponent beats you by 2, then you're taking 2 superficial willpower damage. And everybody has like those willpower trackers, same with the health trackers. Once you fill up your willpower tracker with superficial damage, then it turns into aggravated damage. Usually a social combat ends when one side concedes victory to the other. That can happen at any point. You can just decide, I don't want to take any more willpower damage. You win. You're good. or when the other person loses willpower, has all of their willpower track is filled with aggravated damage, which will cause you to be impaired, which is not fun. I don't recommend getting to that point. Highly recommend giving up before if things are looking bad, because being impaired, especially if it's like a situation where losing might cause combat, that's going to make combat much more difficult for you.
Do I typically know what the NPC's pool looks like engaging in this combat?
No, you don't.
Okay.
You just kind of have to make a good estimate. Usually the way you find out is when the storyteller is rolling a ton of dice. It's just like, oh, yeah, okay. I don't like that sound. Maybe this was a mistake.
It's too much jingle jangle.
But yeah, so another addendum to the system is depending on the situation and the audience, you will take more willpower damage for failure. If it's just you and your opponents, you don't take any extra willpower damage. If your coterie is watching, because you care about their opinion, losing looks worse for you. And vampires are very proud creatures. Losing face is really dire for certain vampires. So if your coterie is watching, you take 1 extra willpower damage. Likewise for your opponent. If your opponent's coterie is watching, they will also take extra willpower damage. If kindred whose opinions you value for themselves, like your mentor or your lover or something like that, you get +2 willpower damage. If it's a primogen or a harpy or other socially important figure or another serious rival besides your current opponent, it's a +3 willpower damage. And if it's the prince or another really powerful figure, it's a +4 willpower damage. And these aren't stacking bottom, so it's not like if all of those are. It's not like if all of those are watching you, you get, all of those modifiers. That would be insane. You just get the highest, whatever the highest authority figure whose opinion matters to you is watching.
Remind me, like, how much willpower does a starting character typically
It depends on, I believe it's like your wits plus your resolve. So it depends on that. Not a lot. So I believe most characters, like an average is like 4 to 5 boxes. So you could, you can take an average of 10 like damage before you're done. But remember, you have to take superficial damage before you can take the aggravated damage. So yeah, about 10 if you have 5 boxes.
Still, like with the scale that small, those huge additional damage bonuses,
they can fill up real quick.
Call it
yeah. And unlike with combat, where it takes place in like rounds, social combat can take over any amount of period that you think is relevant as a storyteller. So players could just, you don't feel like you have to like call for a roll after every point that they make. It could be like you have a conversation back and forth between the two opponents until you've reached like a lull in the conversation. You're like, okay, now it's time to roll. And then they roll. And then if anybody's still standing, they're like, okay, we're going to keep talking this through. Or maybe one person is just like, okay, I'm done. I'm out. Usually debates in front of princes don't last that long because it's the prince. He tends to make a decision pretty quick. He or she tends to make a decision pretty quick. So it makes sense that you're going to be forced to bow out sooner if your opponent gets a big advantage over you.
Also, new vampire, don't start debates in front of the prince.
Definitely not. Not a good idea. Not smart. Unless you have a really solid leg to stand on and you feel like you could beat your opponent, then don't start some stuff that you're not willing to finish in front of the prince.
My leg is strong enough to crush a Coke can.
Yeah. Losing a social combat encounter, especially depending on the audience, can have really bad lasting ramifications beyond just you being impaired. So the storyteller is encouraged to honor those consequences based on how well you performed or how well you didn't perform. Like if you got your ass completely handed to you, you might have a blood hunt declared on you. So the social combat encounters are specifically for those encounters where the outcome of it is really important and really dire, and you want to make sure that it's not just left to one lucky skill check. It's more of like a give and take situation. But I think it's a cool system, and I would like to see it adapted to other systems too, because you don't see anything like this in other games.
I love the idea that you can be so wrong that they decide they just need to hunt you down and kill you.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're arguing, right? Like, obviously, just being wrong is enough to get a blood hunt declared on you. But let's say you're accusing a primogen, which is like the primogens are like the leaders of the different clans. So they're pretty well respected, and they tend to be elders, very old vampires. And you're just a fledgling vampire, and you're accusing them of trying to use their power from the prince. If he just completely hands you your butt in that debate, you've now committed a really grave offense, which is trying to accuse a powerful member of treason with no leg to stand on. Then you would probably get a blood hunt declared on you, because now you've really messed up. So again, don't challenge elders unless you feel like you have a leg to stand on.
Okay.
What was the Kate Beckinsale like vampire werewolf
Underworld
series? Yeah, I like those. Those are solid.
Yeah, White Wolf actually accused Underworld of copyright infringement because
does not surprise me.
Yeah, because they stole a lot of things from Vampire. It was quite blatant.
Yeah. Do you ever wonder if it was just somebody's World of Darkness campaign and they're just like, this would make a good movie series?
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
All right, we have a question of the week this week. This week, our question of the week comes to us from Zmage. I suppose at Zmage, but here we are. Have you played Fabula Ultima, and why not go play it? That feels like a loaded question. I'll open. I have not played it. The first time that I was made aware of it, they took home at least one 2023 Innie, and winning an Innie is awesome. RPGBot knows. So we met. Well, now I'm trying to remember
we met the creative team. Like, we stopped by the booth on the day after the Ennies and met them. They seemed like cool folks.
Yeah, the game looks fun. It has, like, to my mind, in the era that I grew up in, like a very, very like hard like JRPG feel to looking at it. And there's a sea of games out there that I want to go play, and I have not gone and played this one yet. I think it's an Italian creative team, which also I think is a lot of fun.
I'm the odd one out. I have no idea what this is. I've never heard of this before in my life. This is the first time I'm hearing about
it. Okay. So I have a copy of the Quick Start rules on my floor somewhere in that mess. Okay. The elevator pitch is it is a like Final Fantasy inspired, JRPG inspired tabletop RPG.
Sold.
Like there's the it's
sold.
Like character building is a lot like Final Fantasy Tactics, where like you have careers and you can switch careers and multi-class and essentially build your character however you want. So character creation looks like a ton of fun. The art style is very much like your classic Final Fantasy games, like feels very, very nostalgic, cartoony, lots of fun. I have not read.
Stop. I can only get so excited. Okay.
Yeah. But we have not played it yet because we have not read it, but it looks really cool. It's on my pile of games that I need to read.
Maybe we'll do a quick start guide on it at some point.
Maybe.
It could be fun.
It's on the list. It sincerely, it looks cool. I don't know enough about it to say anything intelligent about it, but I'd be excited. Final Fantasy Rebirth comes out in less than 3 weeks. I'm really excited.
And then we're going to lose. We'll always remember that as the day that we lost Randall to the ether.
Yeah.
It was nice. It was nice being your friend, buddy. I'm going to miss you.
I know, it's been great. I've loved doing this podcast. It's been wonderful. Folks at home, thanks for your time.
Someone's going to take that way too seriously.
Yeah.
How dare you get rid of Randall? This podcast is awful. Unsubscribe.
Everyone's like, meh. All hail the Leisure Illuminati. I'm Randall James. You'll find me at amateurjack.com and on Twitter and Instagram at jackamateur.
I'm Tyler Campshaw. You'll find me on RPGBOT.net, Facebook and Twitter, RPGBOT.Net, and most other socials as RPGBot.
And I'm Ash Eli. You'll find me being socially awkward on Twitter at Graven Ashes, which is not far from the truth, or on YouTube at Ash Raven Media. If you want me to be socially awkward in your presence and run games for you, yes, I can do that too. Start playing .games, link in the description. I get confident once I start into it, but there's that social awkwardness of meeting new people. But It is what it is. I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah, I swear, you put a DM screen in front of me and the charisma just goes.
Yeah, that is true.
Roof.
That is 100% true. Yeah.
It's like, this is my emotional support DM screen. I take it everywhere so I can handle social situations.
You go on a date. It's just like, so what do you do? Okay, so you all meet in an Italian restaurant.
He actually only goes to restaurants that have the trifold so that he can set the menu in front of him. Roll for mozzarella sticks.
I'm nailing this date. Roll for yes or true.
If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcast and rate us on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. It's a quick, free way to support the podcast and helps us to reach new listeners. You'll find links in the show notes. You'll find affiliate links for source books and other materials linked in the show notes, as well as on RPGBOT.net. Following these links helps us to make this show happen every week. If your question should be the question of the week next week, please email podcast@rpgbot.net or message us on Twitter at RPGBOT.net. Please also consider supporting us on Patreon, where you'll find all kinds of great rewards. At any tier, you'll get early access to RPGBOT.content and polls for future content. At our $3 tiers, you'll enjoy your choice of ad-free access to the RPGBOT.net or ad-free podcast episodes and access to live-streamed podcast recordings. At our $5 tiers and above, you'll get all of that plus access to the RPGBOT.Discord. You'll find us at patreon.com/RPGBOT.
Good boy. Didn't break.
I don't think. I think he looked away from us. He's learned his lesson.
Has. Yeah.
I figured out some things.
Damn it.
I don't know. I don't know if people do it that often. If you're still listening, I think it's great that you're listening. We're really glad that you're here with us right now. I posted a short story to Amateur Jack a bit ago. It's weird. Hope and recovery. Take a look.
I need to take a look at that as well.
Yeah. We'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah.
I don't like
I'm sure it's good. I'm sure it's good.
Yeah. Randall's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
It's fine.
All
it's
right.
weird.